The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of the Willow Creek station, kicking up dust that shimmered gold in the fading September sunlight of 1873. Carrick Montgomery stood tall on the wooden platform, his weathered Stetson pulled low against the glare as he scanned the arriving coach. His hand nervously checked his pocket watch for the fourth time, then brushed at his freshly trimmed beard. After 5 years of solitary ranching in the Wyoming Territory, today he'd meet the woman who had agreed to be his wife. The driver hopped down, stretching his back before moving to open the door. "Tough journey from Cheyenne," he muttered to Carrick. "Your mail-order bride's aboard. Ain't said a word the whole trip." Carrick nodded, his throat suddenly dry. The correspondence with Miss Amelia Foster had been brief, but promising a 22-year-old schoolteacher from Boston seeking a fresh start out west. Her letters had been well-written, thoughtful, suggesting a sensible woman who understood what marrying a rancher might entail. The coach door swung open. A small gloved hand appeared, followed by the hem of a dusty blue traveling dress. The woman who emerged stood frozen for a moment, her face obscured by a modest bonnet. When she finally looked up, Carrick's practiced greeting died in his throat. Her face was streaked with tears, her blue eyes red-rimmed and swollen. She clutched a small valise to her chest like a shield, her shoulders trembling visibly even beneath her heavy traveling cloak. "Miss Foster," Carrick stepped forward, removing his hat. She nodded once, her lips pressed together as though fighting to maintain composure. "I'm Carrick Montgomery." He offered his hand, which she took with obvious reluctance. "Welcome to Willow Creek." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. She quickly wiped them away with a handkerchief already damp from previous use. "I apologize, Mr. Montgomery," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This is not how I intended our first meeting to be." Around them, the station bustled with activity as passengers disembarked and luggage was unloaded. A few curious onlookers had paused to watch the awkward scene unfold. Carrick guided her gently away from prying eyes, toward the small bench at the end of the platform. Once seated, he reached into his pocket and offered her a clean handkerchief. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said quietly. "Whatever's troubling you, Miss Foster, I reckon you've had a long journey to think on it. No need to force a smile on my account." Her eyes widened slightly, and she accepted his handkerchief with a trembling hand. "You're very kind, sir. I fear I may have made a terrible mistake." Carrick felt his stomach tighten. He'd heard tales of mail-order brides taking one look at their prospective husbands and fleeing on the next eastbound coach. He wasn't a vain man, but he knew his appearance was decent enough, tall and broad-shouldered at 31, with a face that, while weathered by sun and wind, his mother had always called handsome. "Is it me?" he asked directly. "If I'm not what you expected, no." She interrupted, looking genuinely surprised. "No, Mr. Montgomery, it's not you, it's—" She glanced around nervously. "May we speak somewhere more private?" Carrick nodded, retrieving her trunk from the stagecoach driver and carrying it to his wagon. He helped her climb onto the wooden seat, then settled beside her, giving the reins a gentle snap to set the horses in motion. "My home is about 4 miles outside town," he explained. "We can talk freely there, or I can take you to the hotel if you prefer." Amelia clutched her valise tighter. "Your home would be best, I think." They rode in silence through the small town of Willow Creek. It wasn't much: a general store, blacksmith, saloon, small church, and a handful of other establishments lining the dusty main street. Carrick noticed Amelia taking it all in with apprehensive eyes. Once they'd cleared the town limits, following the winding road that cut through golden prairie grass, she finally spoke. "I lied to you, Mr. Montgomery." Carrick kept his eyes on the road, his expression neutral despite the sinking feeling in his chest. "About what exactly?" "In my letters," she continued, her voice steadying somewhat, I haven't been entirely truthful about my circumstances." The wagon hit a rut, jostling them both. Carrick steadied her with a hand on her arm, then quickly withdrew it. "I'm listening," he said. Amelia took a deep breath. "I told you I was a schoolteacher in Boston. That's true, but I didn't leave my position voluntarily." Her fingers twisted the handkerchief he'd given her. "The headmaster's son. He developed an attachment to me. When I refused his advances, he became angry. He told his father I had behaved inappropriately with him." Carrick's jaw tightened. "And they believed him," she nodded. "My reputation was ruined overnight. No respectable school would hire me after that. I couldn't find work anywhere in Boston." A bitter smile crossed her lips. A ruined woman has few options. They crested a small hill, and Carrick's ranch came into view, a modest two-story house with a wide porch surrounded by outbuildings and corrals. In the distance, cattle grazed across the rolling landscape. "So you answered my advertisement," Carrick said. "Yes. But I didn't tell you about the scandal. I was afraid you wouldn't consider me if you knew." She looked at him directly now, her tear-stained face solemn. "I understand if you wish to nullify our arrangement. I can return to town and take the next coach eastward." Carrick slowed the wagon as they approached the ranch. "Miss Foster, may I speak plainly?" She nodded. "I'm not much for games or pretense. Out here, a person's judged by their actions more than rumors. What matters to me is whether you were truthful about wanting a real partnership, about being willing to work alongside me to build something worthwhile." He gestured toward the ranch. "This land is my life's work. It's not much compared to Boston society, but it's mine. I advertised for a wife because I'm tired of facing it alone." The wagon rolled to a stop in front of the house. In the yard, a dog barked excitedly, rushing to greet them. "That's Rusty," Carrick said, a hint of affection warming his voice. "He's friendly, just enthusiastic." Amelia watched the dog circle the wagon, her expression softening slightly. "Mr. Montgomery," she said, turning back to him. "I may have omitted parts of my past, but I was honest about wanting a fresh start and being willing to work hard. I've never shied away from difficulty." She straightened her shoulders. "If you're still willing to honor our agreement, I promise you won't find me wanting in dedication or effort." Carrick studied her for a long moment. Behind the tear-stained face and fear, he saw determination in the set of her jaw, the steadiness returning to her eyes. "Let's get you settled," he said finally, climbing down from the wagon. "You've had a long journey. We can discuss the future after you've rested." He helped her down, noticing how small her hand felt in his, how light she was as he lifted her to the ground. Rusty bounded up, and Amelia tentatively extended her hand for the dog to sniff. "Hello, Rusty," she murmured. The dog wagged his tail, seemingly approving of the newcomer. Carrick carried her trunk to the house, pushing open the front door. "It's not fancy," he warned, suddenly seeing his home through a stranger's eyes, the sturdy but plain furniture, the practical layout. He'd spent the past week cleaning until every surface shone, but it was still unmistakably a bachelor's dwelling. Amelia stepped inside, removing her bonnet. For the first time, Carrick saw her properly honey-blonde hair pinned in a practical style, features delicate but not fragile, with those striking blue eyes that, despite the redness from crying, held an intelligence that matched her letters. "It's lovely," she said quietly, her gaze taking in the large stone fireplace, the bookshelves filled with volumes, the windows that let in the late afternoon light. "Did you build it yourself?" "Most of it," Carrick acknowledged. "Had help with the framework and chimney." He gestured toward the stairs. "Your room is upstairs, first door on the right. I've prepared it for you, but if there's anything you need changed, just say so." She glanced at him questioningly. "We're not married yet, Miss Foster," he explained. "The preacher comes through town every other Sunday. He'll be here this weekend if—" He left the sentence unfinished, relief visibly washed over her face. "Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. That's most considerate." Carrick carried her trunk upstairs, setting it in the bedroom he'd spent weeks preparing. He'd bought a new quilt from the general store, hung fresh curtains his neighbor Mrs. Brennan had helped him sew, and placed a small vase of wildflowers on the dresser. When he returned downstairs, he found Amelia standing at the window, looking out at the ranch. Rusty had settled at her feet as if he'd known her forever. "I need to tend to the evening chores," Carrick said. "The kitchen's stocked, but don't feel obligated to cook tonight if you're too tired." "There's stew left from yesterday." She turned from the window. "I'll prepare supper, Mr. Montgomery. It's the least I can do after your understanding." Carrick nodded and headed for the door, then paused. "Miss Foster." "Yes. Whatever happened in Boston, it stays in Boston. Out here, you get to decide who you are." A genuine smile touched her lips for the first time. "Thank you." Outside, as Carrick walked toward the barn, he wondered what he'd gotten himself into. A mail-order bride with a ruined reputation wasn't what he'd expected. But then, he suspected his ranch wasn't what she'd expected either. He'd give her a week, he decided. 1 week to see if they could forge something real from this unexpected beginning. Amelia stood motionless in the center of the kitchen long after Carrick had gone. Her hands trembled as she unpinned her hat and removed her travel-stained gloves. The kitchen was surprisingly well organized for a bachelor's home. Pots hung neatly, dishes stacked in orderly fashion, a wood-burning stove that looked recently blackened. She moved to the water pump at the sink, working the handle until cool water flowed. Splashing her face, she tried to wash away the evidence of her tears. How mortifying to arrive in such a state, confirming every stereotype of the hysterical female. Yet Mr. Montgomery's response had been unexpected. No demands, no immediate rejection of her confession. Just that steady gaze and the simple offer. "You don't have to pretend with me." Could she trust such generosity? Experience had taught her that men's kindness often came with conditions. She explored the house while gathering ingredients for supper. The parlor contained a comfortable-looking armchair positioned near the bookshelves, which held an impressive collection for a frontier rancher: history, poetry, even some novels. A desk in the corner held papers neatly stacked, suggesting Mr. Montgomery kept careful records of his business. Upstairs, she returned to her bedroom to change into a fresh dress. The room was larger than she'd anticipated, simply furnished but comfortable, with a window overlooking the western range. The wildflowers were a particularly thoughtful touch. As she unpacked her meager belongings, Amelia wondered what Carrick Montgomery really wanted in a wife. His advertisement had been straightforward. Rancher seeks practical, hard-working woman for marriage, property established but expanding, companionship and partnership offered in return for same. No flowery promises or romantic declarations. By the time Carrick returned to the house, Amelia had prepared a simple but hearty meal of salt pork, beans, and biscuits. She'd found a jar of preserves in the pantry and set it on the table alongside butter she'd discovered in the spring house. He entered, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. The scent of food made him pause, an expression of pleased surprise crossing his face. "You didn't need to go to such trouble," he said, washing his hands at the basin she'd prepared. "It's no trouble. I enjoy cooking." Amelia gestured toward the table. "Please sit." They ate in awkward silence at first, until Carrick asked about her journey west. Gradually, conversation flowed more naturally as they discussed neutral topics, the changing landscape she'd witnessed from the train and stagecoach windows, the unusual spring weather Wyoming had experienced. "The ranch has 60 head of cattle now," Carrick explained as they finished eating. "Started with just 12, planning to double the herd in the next 2 years." "That's impressive," Amelia said sincerely. "You've accomplished a great deal on your own." Carrick shrugged. "Had help from neighbors when needed. That's how it works out here. Everyone pitches in." He hesitated. "Speaking of neighbors, the Brennans have invited us for Sunday dinner after church. Martha's eager to meet you. I told her we'd come, but if you're not comfortable..." "No, that sounds lovely," Amelia interjected, though the thought of facing strangers made her stomach tighten. "Are there many families nearby?" "Not what you'd call nearby by Eastern standards. Brennan's are closest, about 3 miles east. Thompson Place is 5 miles north. Town's growing, though. New families arriving every month." He studied her across the table. "It can be isolating out here." "That's something to consider." The implication was clear. This was her chance to reconsider before any formal commitment. "I understand isolation, Mr. Montgomery," she said quietly. "In some ways, it seems preferable to being surrounded by people who judge without knowing." He nodded, seeming to accept this. "There's something I should show you," he said, rising from the table. He disappeared into the parlor, returning with a folded paper which he placed before her. It was a deed to the ranch with both his name and a blank space where hers would go. "If we marry," he explained, "half of everything becomes yours. I had the lawyer draw it up last month. I want my wife to be a true partner, not a housekeeper who works without stake in what we build." Amelia stared at the document, speechless. In Boston, married women had no legal right to property. Here, this virtual stranger was offering her security that most women, even in the highest society, could never claim. "Why would you do this?" she finally asked. Carrick's expression remained serious. "Because ranching is hard. Days are long, winter's brutal. If someone's going to face that alongside me, they deserve equal share in the rewards." He reclaimed the paper. "Think on it. No decision needs making tonight." After dinner, Carrick insisted on washing the dishes while Amelia dried them. The domestic task performed together felt strangely intimate. When their hands accidentally touched passing a plate, Amelia felt her cheeks warm. "I should retire," she said once they'd finished. "It's been a long day," Carrick nodded. "Breakfast is usually at sunrise." "But sleep as long as you need tomorrow. You've traveled far." Upstairs in her room, Amelia sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. Outside her window, the vast Wyoming sky blazed with more stars than she'd ever seen in Boston. The silence was profound. No carriages on cobblestone streets. No neighbors' voices through thin walls. Just wind through grass, distant cattle lowing, and somewhere in the house below, the solid footsteps of the stranger who might become her husband. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through curtains Amelia had forgotten to close. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous day flooded back, and she sat up quickly, dismayed to see the sun already well above the horizon. She dressed hastily in a practical brown work dress, pinned up her hair and hurried downstairs, expecting to find Carrick impatiently waiting. Instead, the house was empty save for Rusty, who thumped his tail in greeting. On the kitchen table, she found a note written in a surprisingly elegant hand. "Miss Foster gone to check the north pasture. Back mid-morning. Coffee on the stove, bread and preserves for breakfast. Rest well." KM relieved she hadn't offended with her tardiness on her first morning. Amelia poured herself coffee and stepped onto the front porch. The view in daylight was breathtaking, rolling grasslands stretching toward distant mountains, cattle grazing peacefully in the nearest pasture. The ranch buildings were more extensive than she'd realized in yesterday's fading light. Beyond the barn, she could see a chicken coop, smokehouse, and what appeared to be the beginnings of a new structure. Finishing her coffee, Amelia decided to make herself useful. She returned inside and took inventory of the kitchen, making a list of supplies they might need from town. Then she rolled up her sleeves and began a thorough cleaning of the already tidy house. By mid-morning, she'd swept every floor, dusted every surface, and was kneading dough for fresh bread when she heard a horse approaching. Through the window, she watched Carrick dismount, a fluid, graceful movement that spoke of years in the saddle. He removed his hat and wiped his brow before leading the horse to the barn. Amelia quickly checked her appearance in the small mirror by the door, smoothing loose strands of hair and brushing flour from her cheek. She wasn't entirely sure why she cared what she looked like after a morning of housework. When Carrick entered, the scent of fresh baking filled the house. His eyes widened slightly at the transformation: gleaming surfaces, organized shelves, dough rising by the stove. "You've been busy," he said, hanging his hat on its peg. "I hope you don't mind," Amelia replied. "I want it to be useful, mind. It looks better than it has since." He trailed off, then finished quietly, "Since my mother visited 3 years ago." Something in his voice made Amelia pause. "Are your parents still in the East?" Carrick shook his head. "They passed on, father just after the war, mother in '70. "I'm sorry," she said sincerely. He acknowledged this with a nod. "What about your family? Your letters mentioned parents in Boston." Amelia's hand stilled on the dough. "My father is a merchant. Mother manages their social calendar. I have 2 younger sisters." She hesitated. They don't know I've come west to marry. They believe I've taken a teaching position in Chicago." Carrick's eyebrows rose. "You didn't tell them. They wouldn't have understood." Amelia resumed kneading with more force than necessary. After the scandal, they were mainly concerned with how it affected their standing in society. "My father suggested I move to his cousin's home in Maine to wait out the gossip, as if one could simply hide for years until people forgot. And coming west as a mail-order bride seemed a better option. It offered a fresh start," she said simply, "and independence, even if that independence comes through marriage." Something in Carrick's expression softened. "Well, I'm glad you're here, even if your reasons weren't what I imagined." "What did you imagine, Mr. Montgomery?" The question slipped out before she could reconsider. He leaned against the doorframe, considering. "Honestly, I figured you might be running from poverty, or perhaps seeking adventure. Or maybe just practical enough to recognize that a business arrangement between compatible people might grow into something worthwhile. And now, knowing what you know about me, now I think you're braver than most men I've known," he said quietly. "Takes courage to leave everything familiar behind, especially alone." The simple compliment, delivered without flattery, warmed something in Amelia's chest. She looked away, suddenly flustered. "I should finish this bread," she murmured. "And I should show you around the ranch," Carrick replied. "When you're ready, that is. A woman should know what she's potentially agreeing to." An hour later, they walked together across the property, Rusty bounding ahead through the tall grass. Carrick pointed out the boundaries of his land, explained his plans for expansion, showed her the spring that provided their water. "Creek never runs dry, even in drought years," he explained. "That's why this land was worth the risk." "How long have you been here?" Amelia asked, trying to keep pace with his long strides. 5 years. Came west after the war with what savings I had. Worked on other ranches until I could afford this place." He gestured toward a half-built structure near the barn. "That'll be a larger smokehouse." "The herd's growing. need more space for processing. Amelia noticed how his face lit up when discussing his plans for the ranch. This wasn't merely property to him, it was a vision being brought to life. "It's impressive, what you've built," she said sincerely. Carrick glanced at her as if gauging her sincerity. "It's not what most women would want." "Perhaps I'm not most women," she responded. A smile tugged at his lips, the first real smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his serious face, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "No, Miss Foster, I don't believe you are." They continued walking, falling into step beside each other. The vastness of the landscape made Amelia feel simultaneously small and strangely free. No buildings hemming her in, no judging eyes watching from windows. "Call me Amelia," she said suddenly. "If we're to consider marriage, Miss Foster seems overly formal," Carrick nodded. "Amelia, then. And I'm Carrick." At the corral, he introduced her to the horses, his own chestnut gelding named Buck, a dappled mare called Penny, and a gentle palomino. "This one's yours if you decide to stay," he said as the palomino nudged Amelia's shoulder. "Her name's Daisy. She's even-tempered, good for someone who hasn't ridden much." Amelia stroked the horse's velvety nose. "What makes you think I haven't ridden much?" Carrick looked surprised. "Have you?" "My grandfather owned a farm outside Boston. I spent summers there as a child. I may not be a cowgirl, but I can stay on a horse." She smiled, remembering. "Grandfather said I had a natural seat." For a moment, Carrick simply stared at her, something unreadable in his expression. Then he laughed, a rich, warm sound that Amelia immediately wanted to hear again. "I stand corrected," he said. "Seems there's more to you than meets the eye, Amelia Foster." "I could say the same about you, Carrick Montgomery." Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a moment of genuine connection that surprised them both. Carrick cleared his throat and looked away first. "We should head back," he said. "Storms brewing western sky." Sure enough, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. By the time they reached the house, the wind had picked up, carrying the scent of rain. They spent the afternoon indoors as the storm rolled through. Carrick showed Amelia his account books, explaining the ranch's finances with surprising transparency. She was impressed by his meticulous record-keeping and the careful way he'd built his operation without falling into debt. "Most ranchers borrow heavily," he explained. "One bad winter can ruin them. I'd rather grow slowly but surely." "That's sensible," Amelia agreed. "Though I imagine it requires patience." "Something I've had to learn," he admitted. "Wasn't always my strong suit." As lightning flashed outside, Carrick built a fire in the hearth. The crackling flames and drumming rain created a cozy atmosphere that made conversation flow more easily. Amelia found herself sharing stories of her teaching days, the children she'd grown attached to, the satisfaction of watching young minds develop. "You miss it," Carrick observed. "Teaching." "I do," she acknowledged. "But that chapter has closed." "Maybe not entirely," he said thoughtfully. "Willow Creek's growing fast. Talk of building a proper schoolhouse by next year. They'll need a teacher." Amelia looked at him sharply. "You wouldn't mind if your wife worked outside the home," Carrick shrugged. "Ranch needs tending, certainly. But winters are long, and if teaching brings you joy." He let the thought hang unfinished. That evening, they prepared supper together, moving around the kitchen with increasing comfort in each other's presence. Over the meal, Carrick explained the routine of ranch life through the seasons: the spring calving, summer grazing, fall roundup, and winter maintenance. "It's never easy," he warned, "but there's satisfaction in it." "I'm not afraid of hard work," Amelia assured him. "Though I should confess I've never actually milked a cow." "We have exactly one milk cow," Carrick said with amusement. "Old Bessie. She's gentle as they come. I'll teach you tomorrow if you'd like." "I would," Amelia said, realizing she meant it. That night, lying in bed listening to the rain, Amelia reflected on the unexpected turn her life had taken. 2 days ago, she'd been weeping on a stagecoach, certain she'd made a terrible mistake. Now, she was considering a future that, while uncertain, held genuine possibility. Carrick Montgomery was nothing like she'd imagined from his letters. The serious, practical rancher had depths she hadn't expected: intelligence, consideration, and a quiet strength that put her at ease rather than intimidated her. It wasn't love, of course. Such feelings couldn't develop in a single day. But it was something. A foundation, perhaps, on which something real might be built. The next morning dawned clear and fresh after the storm. Amelia woke earlier, determined to have breakfast ready before Carrick began his chores. She found him already in the kitchen, however, coffee brewing on the stove. "Good morning," he said, looking up from the letter he was writing. "Sleep well." "Very, thank you," she gestured to his paper. "Important correspondence, list for the general store. Thought we might ride into town today if you're agreeable. You can meet some folks, get supplies." The prospect of facing the townsfolk made Amelia nervous, but she recognized the necessity. "Of course. What time were you thinking, after the morning chores?" "There's a dress shop Martha Brennan recommended. Thought you might want to look in, maybe order something for Sunday." Amelia glanced down at her practical brown dress, one of only 3 she'd brought with her. None were particularly suitable for a church wedding. "That's thoughtful of you," she said. Carrick folded the list and tucked it into his pocket. "Also thought we might discuss the wedding. Preacher Jenkins will be here Sunday if you've decided." He left the sentence unfinished, his expression carefully neutral. Amelia took a deep breath. "I'd like to proceed as planned if you're still willing." Relief flashed across Carrick's face, quickly masked. "I am." "Then Sunday it is," she said, surprised by her own certainty. After breakfast, Carrick made good on his promise to teach Amelia to milk Bessie. They walked to the small barn together, where the placid brown cow greeted them with a soft moo. "She's friendly," Carrick assured Amelia, patting the animal's side. "Just approach her calmly." He demonstrated the technique, then guided Amelia's hands, showing her how to grasp and pull in the proper rhythm. His calloused hands were gentle over hers, his voice patient as he explained. The unexpected intimacy of the moment, his chest nearly against her back, his breath warm near her ear, made Amelia acutely aware of him as a man, not just a potential husband. "You're a natural," he said approvingly as milk streamed into the pail. "I had a good teacher," she replied, glancing over her shoulder to find his face closer than expected. Their eyes met, and Carrick held her gaze a moment longer than necessary before stepping back. "I'll saddle the horses," he said, his voice slightly gruff. "We should reach town before midday." The ride to Willow Creek took just under an hour. Amelia was grateful for the opportunity to prove her horsemanship, and Carrick seemed impressed by her comfortable seat and easy handling of Daisy. "You didn't exaggerate your riding abilities," he commented as they approached the town. "I rarely exaggerate anything," Amelia replied, "though I'll admit it's been years since I've ridden regularly." "You'll have plenty of opportunity now," Carrick said. "Can't manage a ranch without horseback." Willow Creek looked more welcoming in daylight than it had upon Amelia's tearful arrival. The main street boasted several new buildings alongside the original establishments, suggesting a town on the rise. People nodded greetings to Carrick as they rode past, curious eyes taking in Amelia's presence. They tied their horses outside the general store, and Carrick offered his arm as they entered. The proprietor, a balding man with spectacles, looked up from his ledger. "Montgomery. Heard your bride arrived." His gaze shifted to Amelia. "Madam, welcome to Willow Creek." "Thank you, Mr. Wilson, Albert Wilson." He extended his hand, which Amelia shook. "My wife's been beside herself with curiosity. New faces are always welcome, especially ladies. Town's got far too many single men for comfort." Carrick handed over his list. "Need these items, Al, and Miss Foster will be selecting some fabric and notions." Of course, of course." Wilson gestured toward the back of the store. "Fabric section's just been expanded. Mary Thompson ordered in some new patterns from back east." As Amelia browsed the fabric selection, she was approached by a plump, cheerful woman who introduced herself as Beatrice Wilson. "So you're Carrick Montgomery's mail-order bride. My, he's landed himself a pretty one." The woman's frank assessment was delivered with such good-natured warmth that Amelia couldn't take offense. "We're all so pleased he's finally settling down. Been worried about that boy all alone out there." "You've known Mr. Montgomery long?" Amelia asked, genuinely curious. "Since he first came to the territory. Quiet sort, but reliable as sunrise. Helped build half the structures in town, never asking payment. Just the sort of neighbor you want in a place like this." Beatrice lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Broke half the single girls' hearts when he sent east for a bride instead of courting locally." This was news to Amelia. There were women interested in him. Honey, a man like that, hardworking, honest, with his own land and not bad to look at. They were practically drawing straws for the chance. Beatrice chuckled, but he never seemed to notice, too focused on that ranch of his. The information gave Amelia pause. Carrick could have had his pick of local women, yet he'd chosen to advertise for a mail-order bride. Why? After selecting a lovely blue fabric for a wedding dress and arranging for the seamstress to fit her that afternoon, Amelia rejoined Carrick at the front of the store. "Everything satisfactory?" he asked. "Very. Mrs. Wilson has been most helpful." Carrick nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable. "I need to speak with the blacksmith about some repairs. Would you mind if I left you with the seamstress for an hour?" "Not at all," Amelia assured him. "I have plenty to occupy me." After arranging to meet at the small cafe for lunch, they parted ways. The seamstress, a sharp-eyed Frenchwoman named Madame Bouvier, clucked disapprovingly at the haste required but promised a simple but elegant wedding dress by Saturday. "For Monsieur Montgomery I make exception," she declared, pins in her mouth as she measured Amelia. "Good man. Deserves beautiful bride." By the time Amelia met Carrick for lunch, she'd received similar assessments from half a dozen townspeople. Everyone spoke highly of him, his work ethic, his fairness, his willingness to help neighbors. It painted a picture of a man deeply respected in his community. At the cafe, a small establishment with checked tablecloths and savory aromas, Carrick pulled out Amelia's chair. "How was your morning?" he asked once they were seated. "Educational," she replied honestly. "Your neighbors think quite highly of you." A flush colored his tan cheeks. "Small towns, everyone knows everyone's business. They seem like good people. They are, mostly." He hesitated. "Was it overwhelming, meeting so many at once?" Amelia considered this. "A bit, but they've been welcoming. Good." He seemed relieved. "I was concerned, after what you told me about Boston, that I might face similar judgment here." Amelia shook her head. "No one here knows my past, Carrick, and based on what Mrs. Wilson said, I believe they're more interested in welcoming a new neighbor than in scrutinizing her." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the cafe owner, a robust woman who introduced herself as Edith Parker. "About time you brought your bride to meet us properly, Carrick Montgomery," she scolded good-naturedly. "We were beginning to think you were hiding her away." "Miss Foster only arrived 2 days ago, Edith," Carrick reminded her with patience that suggested long familiarity with the woman's forthright manner. "Well, she's here now, and prettier than rumor had it." Edith turned to Amelia. "You must join Our Ladies' Aid Society, dear. We meet Thursdays at the church. Nothing formal, just sewing and more gossip than is probably godly." "I'd be delighted," Amelia said, genuinely touched by the invitation. After a hearty lunch of beef stew and fresh bread, they continued their errands around town. Carrick introduced Amelia to the banker, the preacher's wife, and several other prominent citizens. By mid-afternoon, she'd received more warm welcomes and invitations than she'd had in her last year in Boston. Their final stop was the small church where they would be married. It was a simple white structure with a modest steeple, surrounded by a picket fence. "Not as grand as Boston churches," Carrick said as they stood before it. "It's perfect," Amelia replied, and meant it. The ride back to the ranch was companionable, both of them content with the day's accomplishments. As they crested the hill overlooking the property, Carrick pulled his horse to a stop. "What is it?" Amelia asked, halting beside him. He gestured toward the house and surrounding land, golden in the late afternoon light. "Just wanted you to see it like this. Your home, if you still choose it to be." Amelia studied the scene: the sturdy house, the well-maintained outbuildings, the cattle grazing peacefully in the distance. It wasn't grand or luxurious, but there was beauty in its honesty, its purpose. "I do choose it," she said softly, "and I'm grateful for the choice." Carrick turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Amelia, before Sunday comes, there's something I should tell you." "What is it?" He seemed to struggle for words. "I want you to know why I advertised for a mail-order bride rather than courting locally." Amelia waited, curious after Beatrice Wilson's comments. "I was engaged once before the war," he said finally. "Elizabeth was from my hometown in Pennsylvania. We'd planned to marry when I returned." His voice grew distant. "I came back changed. We all did. Elizabeth, she tried, but she couldn't understand what I'd seen, what I'd done." "She broke the engagement," Amelia guessed gently. Carrick nodded. "Said she wanted the man who'd left, not the one who returned. Can't blame her for that." He took a deep breath. "Afterward, I couldn't bear the thought of courting, of trying to explain myself to someone who expected a different man. Coming west was a fresh start." "But you still wanted a family," Amelia said, understanding dawning. "A partnership," he corrected. "Someone who'd accept me as I am now, not measuring me against who I was before. That's why I was direct in my advertisement, no romantic notions, just honest terms. And then I arrived in tears, completely contrary to what you'd requested," Amelia said with a small, self-deprecating smile. To her surprise, Carrick laughed. "Yes, you certainly weren't what I expected." His expression softened. "But maybe that's for the best." They continued down the hill toward home, something new growing between them, understanding, perhaps, or the beginnings of trust. The next day passed in a flurry of preparations for both the wedding and Sunday dinner at the Brennans. Amelia baked pies to bring as their contribution, while Carrick finished repairs on the smokehouse and cleared away the last of the storm debris. By Saturday evening, Madame Bouvier had delivered the wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation in cornflower blue that complemented Amelia's eyes. Carrick made himself scarce as she tried it on, declaring it bad luck to see the bride in her dress before the wedding. "Not that I'm superstitious," he added hastily, "just traditional in some ways." That night, their last as unmarried individuals under the same roof, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Rusty lay at their feet, occasionally thumping his tail when one of them reached down to scratch his ears. "Nervous about tomorrow?" Carrick asked, breaking a comfortable silence. "A little," Amelia admitted, "though not for the reasons you might think." "Oh, I'm not nervous about marrying you," she clarified. "I'm nervous about meeting so many new people at once, being the center of attention." Carrick nodded, understanding. We could have had a private ceremony. No, this is better, starting our marriage as part of the community. She turned to face him. Are you nervous? He considered this seriously. Yes, but not about the ceremony. His hands rested on his knees, strong and capable. I'm nervous about being a good husband. It's not a role I've prepared for. The simple honesty of his confession touched Amelia deeply. I think perhaps no one is truly prepared for marriage, she said. We can only promise to try our best and be patient with each other's mistakes. Carrick's eyes met hers, warm in the fading light. That seems like a solid foundation. Later, as Amelia prepared for bed, she thought about the strange path that had led her to this moment. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a disgraced school teacher with few prospects. Tomorrow, she would be Mrs. Carrick Montgomery, rancher's wife, with a home and community that already felt more welcoming than Boston had in years. It wasn't the life she'd once imagined for herself, but standing at its threshold, she found herself unexpectedly hopeful. Sunday morning dawned clear and mild, perfect weather for a wedding. Amelia woke early, too nervous to sleep late. She washed her hair and arranged it in an elegant twist, securing it with the pearl-tipped pins that had been her grandmother's. Donning her new blue dress, she studied her reflection in the small mirror. The woman who looked back at her seemed different from the tearful, frightened creature who'd stepped off the stagecoach 3 days earlier. There was color in her cheeks, a brightness in her eyes that had been missing for months. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. Amelia, Carrick's voice came through the wood. Are you ready? We should leave soon if we're to make the service on time. Just a moment, she called, making a final adjustment to her hair. When she opened the door, she found Carrick waiting in his best suit, dark wool, well-tailored with a crisp white shirt and string tie. He'd trimmed his beard and slicked back his hair, transforming from rugged rancher to distinguished gentleman. His eyes widened as he took in her appearance. You look beautiful, he said simply. Thank you. Amelia felt a blush warm her cheeks. You look quite handsome yourself. Carrick cleared his throat, seeming flustered by the compliment. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small velvet pouch. It was my mother's. I'd like you to have it if you're willing. Amelia accepted the pouch, opening it carefully. Inside was a delicate gold band set with a small, perfect diamond. Carrick, she breathed. It's lovely. If you'd prefer something else, no, she interrupted firmly. It's perfect. I'm honored to wear your mother's ring. Relief crossed his features. Good, that's good. The church was nearly full when they arrived. Word of Carrick Montgomery's wedding had spread throughout the community, bringing folks from neighboring ranches and farms. Amelia felt a moment of panic at the sea of unfamiliar faces, but Carrick's steady presence beside her kept her grounded. Preacher Jenkins, a tall man with kind eyes and a booming voice, welcomed them warmly. The ceremony itself was simple but meaningful, traditional vows exchanged with clear voices. The ring slipped onto Amelia's finger with hands that trembled only slightly. I now pronounce you man and wife, the preacher declared. Mr. Montgomery, you may kiss your bride. Carrick looked into Amelia's eyes, a question in his gaze. She gave a small nod and he leaned forward, pressing his lips gently to hers. The kiss was brief but tender, a promise rather than a passion. As they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, Amelia was surprised by the genuine warmth of the applause that greeted them. These people, strangers just days ago, seemed genuinely pleased for their happiness. The Brennans' Sunday dinner was a lively affair. Martha Brennan, a motherly woman in her 50s, embraced Amelia as though they were long-lost relatives rather than new acquaintances. We're so pleased Carrick's finally found someone, she told Amelia as they prepared to serve the feast. That man needed a good woman in his life. I hope I can be that for him, Amelia said honestly. Martha patted her hand. You already are, dear. I haven't seen him smile this much since he arrived in the territory. The dinner conversation flowed easily, with Joseph Brennan regaling them with tales of the early settlement days. Their children, 2 grown sons with wives of their own, and a daughter of 17, added their own stories, particularly about Carrick's help during difficult times. Saved our entire herd during that blizzard of '71, the elder son recounted. Rode out in conditions that would have killed most men. Amelia glanced at Carrick, who seemed embarrassed by the praise. Anyone would have done the same, he murmured. No, they wouldn't have, Joseph said firmly. That's why we're all so glad to see you settled with a good woman. A man who gives that much deserves happiness in return. By the time they headed home, officially home, now, for both of them the sun was setting, painting the grasslands in shades of gold and amber. They rode side by side, comfortable in shared silence. At the ranch, Carrick dismounted first, then moved to help Amelia from her horse. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, his eyes meeting hers with an unspoken question. Well, Mrs. Montgomery, he said softly. Welcome home. The use of her new name sent a thrill through Amelia. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. Before she could move toward the house, Carrick surprised her by sweeping her into his arms. Traditional, he explained, carrying her across the threshold. For good luck. Inside, he set her gently on her feet, his hands remaining at her waist. The house felt different, somehow no longer his alone, but theirs together. Amelia, he began, his voice serious. I want you to know that I don't expect. She placed a finger gently against his lips, stopping his awkward words. I know, she said softly. But I am your wife now in name and in law. I would be your wife in truth as well if you wish it. Carrick's eyes darkened. Are you certain? We've known each other only days. Some people marry having never met at all, she reminded him. At least we've had time to talk, to begin understanding each other. He brought a hand up to touch her cheek. I want this to be right for you. It already is, she assured him. His kiss was different this time, still gentle, but with an underlying passion that made Amelia's heart race. When they finally separated, both were breathing more quickly. I should check on the animals, Carrick said reluctantly. Evening chores. I'll wait for you, Amelia promised. Later, in the darkness of what was now their shared bedroom, they came together as husband and wife. Carrick was tender, patient, his hands gentle as they explored unknown territory. For Amelia, the experience was a revelation, not the pain and duty she'd been warned of by married friends, but a sweet discovery of connection and pleasure. Afterward, lying in Carrick's arms, Amelia felt a sense of peace she'd thought lost forever in the scandal that had driven her from Boston. Happy? Carrick murmured against her hair. Yes, she answered truthfully. Are you? His arms tightened around her. More than I expected to be again. The days following the wedding established a new rhythm to their life together. Carrick taught Amelia the daily operations of the ranch, how to feed the chickens and collect eggs, tend the vegetable garden, churn butter from Bessie's milk. She proved a quick study, approaching each task with determination and intelligence. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch or by the fire, sharing the events of their day. Sometimes they read aloud from Carrick's collection of books, poetry, history, even newspaper accounts from back east. Other times they simply talked, learning the contours of each other's lives and thoughts. At night, they discovered each other more fully, their physical relationship deepening as their comfort with one another grew. Amelia found unexpected joy in the intimacy they shared, and Carrick seemed equally surprised by the depth of their connection. 2 weeks after the wedding, A letter arrived from Boston, Amelia's younger sister, responding to her last correspondence. Carrick found her on the porch after reading it, tears in her eyes. "Bad news?" he asked, settling beside her. "My sister's engagement has been announced," Amelia said, wiping away tears. "To the son of a prominent family. The wedding will be in spring." "You're sad you won't be there," Carrick observed. "Yes." She folded the letter carefully. "But that's not why I'm crying. She writes that my disgrace has been largely forgotten already. A new scandal has captured Boston's attention, a banker absconding with clients' funds." "Isn't that good news, I suppose?" Amelia looked out across the grasslands. "But it makes it all seem so meaningless. My reputation, my career, my entire life, they're ruined over rumors that society has already discarded for fresher gossip." Carrick took her hand. "Not meaningless. It brought you here." The simple statement shifted her perspective. Had she not been forced to leave Boston, she would never have answered Carrick's advertisement, never experienced this new life that was unfolding with unexpected richness. "You're right," she acknowledged. "And I'm grateful for that, at least." As summer progressed into fall, Amelia found her place in both the ranch and the wider community. She joined the Ladies' Aid Society as promised, forming friendships with women like Martha Brennan and Beatrice Wilson. She helped organize a harvest festival for the town, drawing on her experience planning school events in Boston. Most significantly, when the town council finally approved funding for a school, they approached Amelia about teaching. "It would only be 3 days a week," Mayor Thompson explained. "We have 15 children of school age now, more coming with the railroad expansion." Amelia looked to Carrick, uncertain. They were in the general store when the mayor had approached them with the proposal. "The ranch comes first," Carrick said, "but if Amelia wants to teach, I support it. She's a fine teacher from what I understand." The pride in his voice made Amelia's heart swell. "I would be honored to help establish Willow Creek School," she told the mayor. That evening, as they prepared supper together, Amelia broached the subject again. "Are you truly comfortable with me teaching? It would take time away from ranch work." Carrick looked up from the potatoes he was peeling. "Amelia, you light up when you talk about teaching. I wouldn't deny you that joy." He set down his knife. "Besides, you've more than proven your ability to manage both the house and ranch chores efficiently. It's different from what you originally advertised for," she pointed out. "So are you," he replied with a small smile. "Much better than advertised, in fact." The fall roundup kept them both busy from dawn until dusk. Amelia surprised the ranch hands Carrick hired temporarily with her willingness to help cook for the crew, and even ride out to deliver midday meals. By the end of the season, she'd earned their respect, no small feat for a woman from back east. As the first snow dusted the mountains in the distance, Amelia realized with some surprise that it had been nearly 4 months since she'd stepped off that stagecoach in tears. The life she'd built with Carrick already felt more solid, more real than anything she'd known in Boston. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Carrick reading aloud from a new novel while Amelia mended one of his shirts, she was struck by a sudden awareness of her own contentment. She set aside her sewing to study her husband's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow of concentration between his brows, the way the firelight caught in his hair. "Carrick," she said softly. He looked up from the book. "Yes, I love you." The words had risen unbidden to her lips, surprising her as much as him. They hadn't spoken of love before their arrangement had begun as practical, their growing affection developing naturally alongside their partnership. Carrick set the book aside slowly. "Amelia," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "are you certain, completely?" She moved to kneel beside his chair. I didn't expect it. I thought perhaps we might develop fondness, respect, even friendship. But this—" She placed a hand over her heart. "This is love, I'm sure of it." Carrick reached for her, drawing her into his lap. His arms encircled her, strong and secure. "I've been afraid to name it," he confessed against her hair. "Afraid that saying it aloud might somehow break the spell." He tilted her face up to his. "I love you, Amelia Montgomery. Have for weeks now, maybe since that first day when you had the courage to tell me the truth." Their kiss sealed the declaration, deeper and more passionate than any they'd shared before. When they finally drew apart, Amelia rested her head against his shoulder. "I never thought I'd find this," she whispered. "Not after everything that happened." "Nor I," Carrick admitted. "After Elizabeth, after the war, I thought that part of me was dead." They held each other in silence, the fire crackling in the hearth, snow beginning to fall outside the window. Two people who had expected a practical arrangement had found something far more precious, a love born of honesty, respect, and the daily choice to build a life together. Winter settled over the ranch, bringing shorter days and long nights spent in the warmth of their home. Amelia's days were divided between ranch work, preparations for the schools opening after the new year, and making their house more comfortable. She sewed new curtains, braided rugs for the cold wooden floors, and rearranged furniture to create a more harmonious space. Carrick watched her transformations with appreciation. "You've made it a real home," he told her one evening, "better than I ever managed on my own." "It was already a home," she corrected. "I've just added a woman's touch." Christmas approached, bringing with it preparations for the town's celebration. Amelia helped organize a pageant for the children, teaching them carols and simple recitations. Carrick, to her surprise, volunteered to build the stable for the nativity scene. "I didn't know you were so religious," she commented as he worked on the structure in the barn. "Not especially," he admitted, "but my father always said a man should contribute to his community in whatever way he can." He looked up from his work. "Besides, I like seeing you with the children. You'll make a wonderful mother someday." The casual comment sent a flutter through Amelia's stomach. They hadn't discussed children specifically, though the natural outcome of their marriage made parenthood likely eventually. "Would you want that?" she asked carefully. "Children of our own?" Carrick set down his tools, giving the question the serious consideration it deserved. "Yes," he said finally. "I would. A family to work for, to leave this land to someday." He studied her face. "What about you?" "I've always wanted children," Amelia admitted. "Teaching was fulfilling, but I hoped for my own family too." Carrick crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "Then we'll have them, God willing, not just to inherit the ranch, but to raise with love." The Christmas service in Willow Creek's church was a joyous affair. The building overflowed with families from miles around, the children's pageant drawing proud smiles from parents and grandparents alike. Afterward, the community gathered for a feast in the newly constructed town hall. Carrick and Amelia returned home late, pleasantly exhausted from the celebrations. In their bedroom, Carrick presented Amelia with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Merry Christmas," he said, somewhat shyly. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal, its pages blank and waiting. "For your thoughts," Carrick explained. "You mentioned once that you used to keep a journal in Boston." Touched by his thoughtfulness, Amelia retrieved her gift to him from its hiding place, a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue wool, a project she'd worked on in secret during the long evenings. "It's perfect," he declared, immediately wrapping it around his neck despite the warmth of the room. Later, as they lay together in the darkness, Amelia whispered, "This has been the happiest Christmas of my life." Carrick's arms tightened around her. "Mine too," he murmured. "And it's just the first of many." In January, Willow Creek School officially opened in a converted storefront while the proper schoolhouse was being built. Amelia taught 15 students ranging in age from 6 to 16, 3 days each week. The work was challenging but deeply satisfying, and she returned to the ranch each evening with stories of her pupils' progress and amusing anecdotes about their questions. Carrick listened attentively, proud of his wife's accomplishments. On days when the weather was particularly harsh, he would ride into town to escort her home, unwilling to let her make the journey alone through snow or sleet. "You're too protective," she chided one blustery afternoon as they rode side by side. "Just cautious," he corrected. Wyoming winters don't forgive carelessness. February brought a severe blizzard that isolated the ranch for nearly a week. They stayed close to the house, venturing out only to tend to essential chores with ropes tied between buildings to prevent getting lost in the whiteout conditions. During those snow-bound days, they grew even closer, sharing stories they hadn't yet told each other. Carrick's experiences during the war that had changed him so profoundly. Amelia's complicated relationship with her status-conscious parents. "You miss Boston at all?" Carrick asked one night as they lay before the fire, the wind howling outside. Amelia considered the question honestly. "I miss certain things, the libraries, the concerts, some of my former students, but not the life itself." She traced patterns on his chest with her fingertip. "This feels more real somehow, more meaningful. Even when you're snowed in with only me for company," he teased. "Especially then," she replied, pressing a kiss to his lips. As winter gave way to spring, the ranch burst into new activity. Calving season meant long days and sometimes nights for both of them, with Amelia quickly learning to assist with difficult births. Her calm competence impressed even the most experienced ranch hands who returned for the season. "Mrs. Montgomery's got a real knack," Hank, the eldest hand, told Carrick admiringly. "Saved that breech calf that would have been lost for sure." Carrick's chest swelled with pride. "She's remarkable," he agreed, watching as Amelia expertly bottle-fed an orphaned calf. In April, just as the last patches of snow were melting from the north-facing slopes, Amelia confirmed what she'd suspected for several weeks: she was expecting their first child. She shared the news with Carrick one evening as they walked the property, inspecting the new growth of spring grass. "Carrick," she said, stopping beside the creek that ran through their land, "I have something important to tell you." He turned to her, concern immediately crossing his features. "Is something wrong?" "No," she reassured him, taking his hand and placing it gently on her still flat stomach. "Something is very right. We're going to have a baby." Carrick's expression transformed from concern to wonder. "A baby? You're certain?" Amelia nodded, her eyes filling with happy tears. "Martha Brennan confirmed it yesterday. The baby should arrive in late October." For a moment, Carrick seemed unable to speak. Then, to Amelia's surprise, he lifted her gently and spun her in a circle, his laughter echoing across the open land. "Careful," she protested, laughing with him. "I'm in a delicate condition." He set her down immediately, his hand steadying her. "I'm sorry, I'm just—" He shook his head, overcome. "Amelia, I never thought I could be this happy." The news of their expected child spread quickly through the community, bringing congratulations and practical gifts from neighbors. Martha Brennan promised to knit blankets, while Beatrice Wilson began planning a gathering to celebrate the impending arrival. As Amelia's body changed with the growing child, Carrick became increasingly protective, insisting she reduce her teaching to 2 days per week and hiring additional help for the ranch to lighten her workload. "I'm pregnant, not invalid," she reminded him frequently, though she was touched by his concern. "Humor me," he would reply, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "It's my first time being a father." Summer passed in a blur of activity. The ranch prospered, with the largest calf crop they'd yet produced. The school term ended, giving Amelia time to prepare the house for the baby's arrival. Carrick built a cradle from carefully selected wood, working on it in the evenings while Amelia sewed tiny garments. As her due date approached, Amelia sometimes found herself remembering her arrival in Willow Creek, the tearful, frightened woman who'd stepped off the stagecoach less than a year earlier. How different her life had become, how much richer and more purposeful than she could have imagined. One evening in early October, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Amelia took Carrick's hand. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" she asked. "When I was crying at the station," Carrick thought for a moment. "I said you didn't have to pretend with me." "Yes." She squeezed his hand. "I think that was the moment everything changed for me. No one had ever given me permission to simply be myself, not my parents, not my employers, not even my friends in Boston." "I just wanted you to be comfortable," Carrick said. "Seemed wrong to expect a show of happiness when you were clearly distressed." "It was more than that," Amelia insisted. "It was acceptance. You gave me that before you knew anything about me." Carrick brought her hand to his lips. "Best decision I ever made." Their son was born on a clear October morning, arriving after a long night that tested Amelia's endurance and Carrick's composure. Martha Brennan served as midwife, her experienced hands guiding the baby safely into the world. "A fine, healthy boy," she announced, placing the squalling infant on Amelia's chest. "Strong lungs on that one." Carrick, who had remained steadfastly by Amelia's side throughout her labor, stared in awe at his son. "He's perfect," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. They named him James, after Carrick's father. As Amelia recovered her strength, Carrick proved an attentive father, willing to walk the floor with the fussing infant or change dirty diapers without complaint. "You're a natural," Amelia observed one evening, watching him gently rock their son to sleep. "Nothing natural about it," Carrick admitted with a rueful smile. "I'm terrified of doing something wrong, but he's ours, and that makes it worth figuring out." By the time their first wedding anniversary arrived in November, life had settled into a new normal. James was growing rapidly, delighting them with his first smiles and coos. The ranch had enjoyed its most profitable year yet, allowing Carrick to purchase additional acreage and expand their herd. Amelia had returned to teaching 1 day a week, bringing James with her. The students adored the baby, and the school board was discussing building a proper teacher's residence adjacent to the new schoolhouse. To celebrate their anniversary, Martha and Joseph Brennan offered to watch James for an evening, giving the young parents a rare night alone. Carrick prepared a special dinner, serving it by candlelight in their dining room. "To think," Amelia mused as they shared a rare bottle of wine, "a year ago today I was terrified of what my life would become." "And now?" Carrick asked, watching her across the flickering light. "Now I can't imagine any life but this one." She raised her glass. "To us, Carrick. To the family and life we're building together." "To us," he echoed, his eyes warm with love. "And to the woman who showed up in tears but found the courage to stay." As they sat before the fire later that evening, Amelia nestled against Carrick's chest, his arms encircling her. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, blanketing their land in pristine white. Inside, the warmth of their home and their love created a sanctuary against the cold. "You ever wonder," Carrick asked softly, "how different things might have been if you hadn't been crying that day? If you'd arrived pretending to be perfectly happy," Amelia considered this. "I might have maintained the pretense longer, I suppose, tried to be what I thought you wanted rather than who I am." "I'm glad you didn't," he said. I might never have told you my own truths if you hadn't shared yours." "Then I suppose we should be grateful for my tears," Amelia said with a smile. "They led us here." Carrick kissed her tenderly. "No more pretending ever," he promised. "Just this real and true." "Just this," Amelia agreed, returning his kiss. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing their ranch in silence. Inside, the fire crackled in the hearth, its light dancing across the walls of the home they'd built together, a home founded on honesty, strengthened by love, and filled with promise for the years ahead. The mail-order bride who had arrived in tears, and the cowboy who had offered understanding rather than judgment had found something neither had expected, not just a practical partnership, but a love story written in truth, with chapters still unfolding across the wild Wyoming frontier.